The dust has now settled on Celtic's Scottish Cup final win, which now means the boys have lifted the trophy a record 42 times. It was another special day at Hampden with Adam Idah getting the all-important goal in the day, but where does it rank in terms of your favourite Scottish Cup wins of recent times? Here to tell us his top 5 and to talk about a unique trip he'll be taking in the coming days is Celtic author and historian Matt Corr. Matt, welcome back to the Celtic Exchange. We'll hear about your upcoming trip and your own Scottish Cup memories just shortly, but what was your experience of Saturday's latest Scottish Cup success?
I think I've just about calmed down, Tino. So very, very nervous, as I always am for these finals. And I guess in particular, as it was getting towards the close of the game, you're thinking this could go either way. And it could be a long summer, it could be a brilliant summer. And then you just get that moment. It just comes out of the blue, a wee bit of magic, and all of a sudden you're bearing down in goal. And it seems to happen in slow motion, doesn't it? You see the shot, we were side on. You see the shot coming in and the ball coming out, and just there's that second where it hits the net, and a split second before the place are up. So it was a very long, intense afternoon, but my God, what a weekend it was beyond that. So fabulous.
Do you know, you mentioned the kind of slow motion thing. I said it on our show the other day. When it leaves Paulo Bernardo's boot, the delay between the save or the attempted save by Butland and it spilling out to Idah, the whole place just stopped. You know, it felt like an age. Obviously, it was fractions of a second, and then it's that eruption. We were doing our coverage on the weekly show, Matt, and my brother James said there's only 2 ways he wants to beat Rangers: a 5-0 doing or a last-minute winner. What's your favourite type of win over Rangers?
Well, if you're offering me those two, it's a 5-0 win every day of the week. But just when you say that slow motion thing as well, I was there with the tour guides and Saturday number of tour guides, and just one of the boys this morning, his son had managed to capture a picture. It's quite incredible. The picture is taken from official photographers sort of behind the goal, and because of the sort of outfits that the guys were wearing, they've actually managed to pick it out, our wee group of tour guides at the moment of the goal, and the facial expressions in folk, it's like something you would see in the movies. I only seen it this morning. One of the boys put it on their wee chat, and it's just fantastic. But it's literally like cartoon open mouth stuff. And you go along the row, there's so and so and there's so and so, and that's what it was. It's just that second where it's a double take. Is it? And then of course, because of this VAR thing now, you're like, I'm the prophet of doom. I'm sitting down saying, "No, there'll be something wrong with it." Everybody else is killing one another, and I'm sitting there, right? There'll be something wrong with it until he actually kicks off again, and I'm still checking the screen. So ridiculous at my age, but what a moment. So if you could give me 5-0 in like a semi-final a few years ago, which was, I think it was 4-0 that time, and that was cruise control for Celtic, I much more enjoy that. But I guess if you're looking for drama, the 90th minute, basically finishing off the season, Joe Hart's final moments as a senior pro, it's Roy the Rover stuff, isn't it? It's just typical Celtic. It really is. But just about came back down to earth now.
Absolutely. Do you know the VAR thing? I've bemoaned VAR, as everyone has, I think, over the last year or two or whatever it's been. Yeah. And one of my big gripes with VAR is it's removed that spontaneity, that celebration. Scrap that for Saturday. I absolutely lost it. And like a lot of folk, you end up half a dozen rows away from where you should be. And I don't know, it was just such a moment. And then obviously in the aftermath, you're a bit calm. You're thinking, is it good? Is it good? Yeah. And it was good to go, and happy days after that. Matt, I was in touch with you just a wee bit before the game. I don't know if it was the morning of or the day before, and you were telling me about Scottish Cup stuff, and you were telling me about your upcoming trip to Malawi, which we'll cover in a bit of detail just shortly. Okay. And you were saying you were really nervous. I'm really anxious, and I couldn't work out if it was for the Scottish Cup or Malawi. But I think, as it turns out, it was a bit of both, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a bit of both. So we've got that coming up at the weekend. But I think leading up to that week, there's no midweek game. The previous week we had the game at Kilmarnock and the title and everything going on. But I just found that an incredibly long week leading up to the final. The time you get there, you're not worth a button, are you? So yeah, the trepidation is largely gone in terms of Hampden in the season. We now start immediately thinking about next year. But so now I can start panicking about something else. Which says it all about me, really.
Well, just on that, so we're going to cover your own pretty impressive, pretty incredible Scottish Cup final record as such, in the amount of games you've been to of that nature. Even at this age, Matt, I don't know, I'd call you an experienced Celtic fan. You still get nervous?
Oh, incredibly so. It's ridiculous. Superstitions, and yeah, it's incredible. Embarrassing in some ways, but I just don't want to change it. There's wee routines going. I'm turning down invitations to go places because it doesn't fit with the routine. And I know if I go there and that routine's been successful for these guys and we don't win, the scenario, I think it goes back. I used to, as you know, I've always followed Celtic abroad, and the record wasn't great. Let's just leave it as that. And the amount of times they came back and folk were saying, "Gonna you stop going?" or "We're taking your passport because you're the jinx." So I think it got to the point where I started believing it myself. And you're saying, well, maybe I shouldn't go. So I won't go to this trip. And then I wouldn't go to this trip and Celtic would lose anyway. I thought, well, what's the point? I've just missed that. So yeah, ridiculously superstitious, no logic whatsoever to it. But it's certainly in the last 20 years or so, those superstitions have served as well more often than not. So I'm just going to stick to it. That's what I do. That's what I am.
I was going to say, you just keep doing what you're doing, man, and hopefully Celtic keep winning. Do you have any superstitions or routines you'd be happy to reveal here? You know, you've got players who'll do the whole thing where they'll put their left boot on before their right boot, the last out the tunnel, these kind of wee quirks. Have you got anything like that you'd want to share?
Well, some I can share, but some I would share would be the outfit I'll wear. So I'll go Celtic are on a wee run or whatever. So I'll wear the same jersey. So not the current jersey. Usually the jersey I'm wearing or was wearing for this season was 2 years ago, because we're just on a wee run, and I guess since Ange came in, things were working really well. Same sort of jumper, jeans, outfit, routine, who picks up, who drops off, what you do and what you don't do. So it's nonsense stuff. Actually, folk don't know half of them. They only know the ones I declare. But it's ridiculous. I'm actually embarrassed talking about it, but it's there and it's real. And when crazily enough, if I do something a bit different, maybe go to hospitality for a game, we lose it, I'm just like, well, don't ask me back. I don't want to do that. I'll go with the kids. We'll go behind the goal because that works for us. If he's not sitting next to me, that doesn't work either. So it's daft things like that. So I said no logic, and at my age it's embarrassing, but it is what it is.
Exactly. Do you know, you and I might get a wee chat off record, Matt, and you can tell us about some of the more embarrassing ones.
It's not happening.
Fair enough. Matt, obviously an important part of the chat today, and it is very important, is your forthcoming trip to Malawi. You're heading out there with the Celtic FC Foundation. I think it's on Sunday coming, which is the 2nd of June. And it's the first trip that the foundation have taken, the first overseas volunteer trip since 2019. Obviously, COVID put the brakes on a lot of their activities, during those 3-4 years or whatever it was. So do you want to tell us a wee bit about the trip and how that came to be for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's Malawi, and I guess it's part of the 67 Kitchens programme that's been going for some years now. So back in 2019, brother went out with the group. I think they went to Zambia at that time, and did a similar job. Came back, he raved about what an experience it was and whatever. Signed up to go on 2020, that would be, and then, as you say, pandemic kicked in. It was cancelled. It was sort of deferred then each year. And if I'm being honest, I sort of came to the conclusion that it wasn't going to happen. And then all of a sudden, the guys are working your socks off in the background to try and make it happen. Things had moved on. I guess some things had changed. A few hurdle after hurdle it seemed for them to overcome, but overcome it they did. And it's finally going ahead. So as you say, first one since 2019. And I'm going back out. So we're flying via Ethiopia. We're flying to Malawi. We're going to work. We're working with Classrooms For Malawi, a voluntary organisation over there. The idea, I think, is that there's a new classroom block being constructed. In conjunction with the foundation and Classrooms For Malawi, that's all been put in place. And our role will be, I guess, to make that presentable, to do the artwork and whatever, provide the educational tools, for want of a better word, to basically turn it from a few brick walls, an empty structure, into a usable classroom. So you're right, we go first thing on Tuesday morning down to London, then over to Africa, and we're away until something like the 11th or 12th of June before we come back. So a bit of trepidation, if I'm being honest. We've been through all the inoculations and all that, so and when they start talking about some of these illnesses, you're thinking, oh, that's one for the telly. But anyway, so been through that, and it's now just a case of trying to focus on what this might be. I have no real idea what to expect. I believe it will be quite humbling. Hopefully it's of huge value, but I'm going with a completely open mind, and hopefully we can do some good. And I guess as part of that will be to try and raise some funds to support it. I've paid my way there, but the idea is to try and, I guess, leave some kind of legacy and for moving forward.
Yeah, and you know, in similar ways, but very different, of course, you know, in the approach to a cup final or the approach to such a trip, Matt, the nerves get heightened the closer you get to it. And it's a huge trip. You know, I was looking into some of the information around the trip before coming on here today, and Malawi itself is one of the poorest countries in the world. You know, sizable population, 20 odd million, 21 million, I think it is. Yeah, and as you say, you're going out to work with Classrooms for Malawi, whose aim, I think, in short, is to allow children to go to school in a safe, dynamic learning environment. I think it's 8 days long, the trip, Matt, something like that. And can you tell us a bit more about how many are going out with the foundation? And I believe you're going with someone very close to you.
Yeah, so you're right. I think we're actually on the ground for 8 days. The trip itself is, you know, sort of 11 or 12 by the time you take travelling in. About a dozen of us going. Most of whom I don't know. I guess the one I do know, my older brother who was there before, so he's going again. So other than Robert and the two guys for the foundation I know well, I don't actually. I've met them. I've met the others at meetings, but we're all still a wee bit, I guess, strangers in that sense. So part of that trip will be how that group bonds and works together. But to say crucially, it's all about what can we do? Can we make an impact? Can we pack as much as we can into the time that we are there? And I guess just whatever we can do to improve what's happening there, and that would be the goal. So it's a wee bit of the unexpected. So I don't have a definitive answer for you. I don't really know what it's going to be, and part of that is the excitement, and I guess part of that is the slight nervousness. So it's now only a few days away. It becomes real when you start pulling your suitcase out and pulling the stuff together and thinking about it. So come Sunday morning, no doubt the nerves will be at fever pitch. But that was the same as at Hampden last Saturday. So after the season following the Celtic, what's left there nerves is up for grabs, I guess.
Yeah, you were saying there, obviously it's a dozen or so of you going out, relative strangers at this moment in time. I would expect that to be very different by the end of the trip. And also, you've always got that safety net, that common interest, Matt. If push comes to shove and you're struggling for something to talk about, throw up some Scottish Cup final chat or Celtic chat, you'll be absolutely fine. Matt, obviously, as part of, you know, going out in any such venture with the foundation, there's an onus on you to raise a certain amount of funds to facilitate the trip, to allow for your travelling, your own accommodation out there. But rather than just going out and requesting donations, which is great, you know, obviously, you know, a lot of folks doing these trips rely on that very type of activity. You're doing something a wee bit different where, yes, you're requesting that people make a donation, but in turn, you'd like to give something back. I've introduced you, Matt, as Celtic author. You've written several books now on Celtic and Celtic historian. You're obviously a travel guide, a tour guide, in at Celtic Park. You've got that knowledge, you've got that in-depth information and research in the club, which most of us don't have. So tell us a wee bit more about the specific fundraising you're looking to do.
Yeah, yes, you're right. So I'm not a natural fundraiser. I think that's the first thing over the last few years I've done. Predominantly, it's been marathons for Marie Curie or for the foundation. So I guess you can't keep going to the well time after time to the same folk for the same thing. So the difference this time was something for something, I guess, is what I'm calling it. And the idea is that it could be a number of different things. I'll explain sort of how I came to that in a second. But in essence, what I'm offering here is that, I guess, in return for a donation, then perhaps you'll be Father's Day coming up. Maybe there's your dad's first game or your dad's background, or maybe your relative is a Celtic player or a Celtic official or whatever. So the idea is I'll pull together a story or a slideshow or a pack or whatever, a wee talk, something like that. And the idea is that would then be, I'll do the research, I'll pull that together into a story. It becomes something very, very personal to the person who's requested it, either as a surprise or, as I say, for a family member who's got a link to Celtic. So, and how that came about, more through accident than design, if I'm being honest. So, as you know, I do a lot of writing, in the background from time to time, and we tend to move away from, I guess, the normal stories, if that makes sense. And I guess the best example I could give you is, over recent months, did stories on the likes of the life of Jimmy Gribben, the man responsible for Jock Stein and ultimately Jimmy Johnson staying with Celtic and whatever, but maybe a peripheral figure to a lot of supporters. So chance meeting on the tours, fused to life story for Jimmy Gribben, a wee bit different, and seeing the reaction of the family. And then beyond that, also had a chap who sits with me a couple of days, my Celtic pal. So guys you only see at Celtic Park, the best of pals for 90 minutes, and you never see them for the next 2 weeks. I'm sure we've all got them, but I've got several of those guys. One of them sits two seats along, if you like, and his grandfather and his great grandfather both had connections with Celtic in the past. And a chance remarked some time ago that he had some photos I might be interested in, knows what to do. And I said, I'd love to see them. And when you've seen these photos, it blew you away. And I said, look, I can't just have a look at those photos and say they're great. We need to do something with them. So that turned into like a 10,000 word article, which took me probably a couple of months to research and do. Charlie and the boys. And again, the reaction was that Charlie wanted to give me money. I hope he doesn't mind. Charlie wanted to give me money for this. I refused to take it. I don't take money for the things I do. There's no way we do it. And then I turned up at one of the matches and he said, I'm fed up asking you, there's a wee card for you. And of course, in the card's a sum of money. What do you do? I said, well, I'm not going to offend you. I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'm going to Malawi. So what I'll do with that money is I'll put that into, I'll start up a Just Giving page and I'll put that in and you'll be my first guy. And he said, I'm delighted with that. So I thought, actually, is there a hook here? So that's it. You know, I've now got a couple of things on the go. As I say, I'm not a great salesman, as you know, but try to put it out there just saying, look, and obviously there's a finite capacity to do things, but the idea would be something for something, put it on Just Giving page and just say it. If you have that sort of connection or requirement, and it's been nice, folk have come on to say, look, I can't spoil this, so I better watch what I'm saying here, because obviously some folk have come on to do it as a surprise for people in their life. So the idea is I'll ask for some basic information around the game or the season or the player or whatever, and then I'll go and pull that particular story together. So that could be for an individual. Another angle might be it's a supporters bus, you know, a supporters club having a function. So I guess let's use Peter Scarf. I hope they don't mind again. Peter Scarf, an obvious one, because I've done, you know, written the book on the 30s. So maybe Peter Scarf supporters club are having a function, end of season function or whatever, and we'll pull together a few slides and maybe do a wee talk or do a wee talk on Peter, maybe aspects of their life or his career that he didn't know. So something a wee bit different from maybe what we'd normally do or whatever. A really unusual gift for someone in your family, maybe. And the benefit, double benefit, is the time and effort is the cost to me, which I'm happy to do rather than just ask for money. And the benefit is the foundation makes money from that, and the benefit to the donor, if you like, is that they then have something really pretty unique and special that, you know, they can keep forever. So yeah. That's probably not a great description of it, but that's the kind of thing. There's no barrier. I've got some knowledge, and I guess I've got an experience of research and how to pull things together into a piece, short or long. My idea is I'm selling those services, and the cost is whatever you want to pay. There's no fee for it. I'll do it for you, and then I'll ask you to make a donation, what you can or what you can afford and think is appropriate, and that's it. So that's the best way I can describe it, Tino.
Which is spot on, Matt, and I like the whole premise of something for something. You've done your various marathons over the years. I think the trainers are in the cupboard for now. I don't know if they're making a comeback at any point, but you've done various runs for Marie Curie and for the foundation and raised some brilliant funds. But I understand what you're saying. Sometimes you don't want to go back to the well time after time. And this is just something a bit different, and hopefully there's something of value that if someone makes a donation, Matt, whether it's a £5 or 50 quid or anything else in between, you're willing and able to produce something. I was thinking while you were talking, so for example, my dad and a lot of his friends in his generation, they talk about the 1965 Scottish Cup final as the game where everything changed for Celtic. Billy McNeil, Jock Stein's only a few months in the door, and the rest is history from there. For example, but it might be folks of a younger generation, maybe they were there when Celtic beat Barca, or that Tom Rogic moment for the invincible treble. There's no end of Celtic stories that are unique and personable to everybody. Yeah, and the suggestion is if they get in touch, what we'll do here is we'll link right now. Actually, you can go to the show notes for this episode. You'll see the link to Matt's Just Giving page, which gives a wee bit more info, and you can get in touch with Matt there and make your request. And I think it's a brilliant thing to do. Matt, if you were doing it, just hypothetically, if you were looking for something for yourself, what would you pick? What moment, what game, what Celtic incident?
Oh, that's a cracker. Caught me in the back foot. What would I do? There's probably a couple. One would probably be my first cup final success. The first time I seen Celtic winning the cup as a wee boy, and I guess the other one would probably be Barcelona, 125th anniversary. I think that's, you know, it's probably. I need to watch who the audience is, but it's probably the greatest night of my life. Watching Celtic beat Messi and co, minus our captain, minus a striker on my birthday, in the Champions League. We'd been in Barcelona too. Kevin and I, my son, had been in the new Camp Nou 2 weeks earlier, where they scored a goal on the Thursday morning. It was that late, and we thought we've missed our chance here. And then 2 weeks later, there's no Bruni, there's no Hooper, with no hope. He's playing against this side. They were an incredible side, and a teenager for the Coatbridge comes on and scores the winner with 10-minute beats Mascherano and sticks the ball in the corner in front of us, and you're there with your kids experiencing that place. Like even Rod Stewart was crying on the telly that night. He wasn't the only one. So I mean, that's a really difficult question. I know I'm asking folk to do that, but to nail that to win. So there's that at one stage in my life with my grown-up family, if you like. There's ones in the middle where the kids were coming along for the first time, and then there's those where you were the kid and you were with your dad, which one of them we're going to talk about as we go through here. So, but that's exactly the kind of thing. If you were making that offer, then that's the kind of thing, and say, well, I remember this game with my dad or with my son. That would actually be pretty special if we could do that. That's a brilliant example. You played my one game at me, and that immediately I'm thinking of 2, 3, 4 that would be brilliant things to pass on. So I'm going to end up donating myself at this rate. So
do you know? Right, and in hindsight, I should maybe have given you a wee heads up on that, Matt. But I prefer to ask the question on the off the cuff to get that answer. No. One thing we have spoken about, Matt, in advance, and what we'll now get to in terms of this piece is your own unique Scottish Cup memories. Everyone's got their own memories of Celtic in the Scottish Cup, and Saturday, being the most recent example. Yeah. But as I touched on, Matt, at the start of the piece, you've got quite an impressive record when it comes to Scottish Cup final attendances. So before we get to your top 5 Scottish Cup finals, do you want to tell us just how many Scottish Cup finals you've been over the years and what your success rate is there?
Right, well, it's actually more impressive than I thought it was, and not so much impressive in terms of number. That comes with old age. But you'd asked me the question, and at that time it's 22. So after Saturday, it's 23. It's 23. We've won 19 of them, and of the 4 that we lost, one was in penalties, and another one was in extra time, and another one was the last minute. And the other one I don't want to talk about, that was Bobby Davison's final. So we've got an incredible record in the Scottish Cup. I'm glad you never asked me that question in the League Cup a few years ago, because that wasn't anything like as impressive. But it's 23, won 19 and lost 4.
I'm a bit disappointed in those 4, Matt, I've got to say. But maybe that's the standard Celtic have set over the years. But no, to win 19, to be there 23 times and walk away happy 19 is really quite impressive. And what we're going to do here this afternoon, Matt, is run through. And I know it's been hard for you to do, genuinely hard for you to try and trim it down to your top 5. I think from the chat we had before coming on, you're going to bend the rules a wee bit, which is fine. But do you want to start off with the first one that really stands out for you? I believe you're going to do it in chronological order to an extent, but start us off, Matt, with your first big Scottish Cup memory.
All right, so I guess it just hopefully make more sense if we do it in chronological order. And the first one is probably the favourite game of my childhood. In fact, no doubt it was. And it's the Cup final in 1972. And for a number of reasons, I guess, and the main one being it was the first time I'd seen us win a trophy. I'd seen us win the league. The first time I'd seen us win a cup. My first cup final was Aberdeen in 1970, the Davidson final, which I guess those are a certain vintage will remember, at least said about the better. But we lost 3-1. Around about the time we lost the European Cup final in Milan. So at one time everything was on, and that was a major disappointment. About 109,000 clinging on for grim death and the north enclosure on the railings. And then the next one is the League Cup final against Thistle. So I'll probably just leave that one there. So by the time it came to May 72, I think I'm on my last warning, 3 strikes and you're out. The Celtic were up against a fabulous Hibs side under Eddie Turnbull. They were a tremendous side, probably one of the best sides ever to win the league. My favourite player at the time was Dixie Deans, and I guess in the greatest tradition of the fairy tale club, Billy McNeil scores in the first minute. I'm up the top. I'm sitting in a wee stanchion up the top of the Celtic end there with my dad, and at the far end of the stadium, Big Willie scores within a couple of minutes. And although Hibs got an equaliser, by half time Dixie had put us back ahead again, and then he scored the most incredible goal after the second half, where he seemed to beat the defenders and the goalkeeper twice. Then stopped the ball in the net in front of us, and then ran over to the corner and did a Summers, done a wee sort of forward roll jig. So Dixie scored the hat-trick. Lou McCarry scored a couple of goals late on. It was Jim Craig's last game before he went to South Africa. And Celtic won 6-1, which people were tipping Hibs to win the final. So it was the biggest winning margin, equalled, I think, Renton's win in 1888, the year we were formed. And it was also the first hat-trick since Jimmy Quinn in 1904, 68 years. So just think of some of the players that had played there. So that was a special day. There was also a laugh a few years later when, as I had the birthday gift, and I got a gift of one of these historic Celtic books, and my family were together. My nephew was flicking through the pages. We're having a laugh about me in a saddle, which is completely true. and he flicked open to one of the pages, this Celtic 6, Hibernian 1. And I said to him, I remember that day well. I said, I can tell you the crowd. And he looked at me and said, aye, that'll be right. And I said, it's 106, 102. And you seen him looking at the book and looking back up, and he's like, did you say 106, 102? And he looked down and he was like, I don't believe it. And if he'd picked any other game in the world, then I couldn't have done that answer. But that's the page he opened up. And of course, I had it in scrapbooks and everything else. I could have told you what colour of socks the players were wearing that day. It was that game, and he picked it. So without a doubt, the first final, my first one, cup finals, I was only 11 years old, and it was a huge day. Dixie with a hat trick. I remember it being a gorgeous sunny day, but I actually think it might have been raining, because I've seen some film footage recently, silent film footage, and it doesn't look like a nice day. But in my head, it was Hampden in the sun, Celtic 6, Hibs 1, and it was just a magical day. I don't think it was never replicated, certainly not as a child anyway. So that was number one. That was a no-brainer.
It's a cracker to start us off, Matt. I was going to ask, Dixie Deans is still around Celtic Park quite a lot, particularly on match days. I actually bumped into him by chance on Saturday. He was with George McCluskey, as he often is. I think they both do a wee bit of stuff for the club. Have you seen him around in adulthood and managed to chat about that game or anything?
Yeah, well, yes to the first part, not so much about that game, but he's very friendly with Tommy Callaghan, who I've become friendly with after the Harry Hood book. Tommy was very kind with the Harry Hood book. We've become good pals, and he works with Dixie and George, as you say. And when he introduced me the last time, but the other thing about Dixie is about 19, so that was 72, about 1975 or thereabouts, the Celtic View used to have a feature called the Celtic Boy, where you would be walking up to the game and somebody would tap you on the shoulder and get a picture taken, and the prize was, I guess the prize was to put their picture in the View, which meant you get slaughtered at school on the Monday. But the real prize was you get an invite for you and your dad then to go to Hampden, to go to Celtic Park as a guest, and I had to meet Dixie. So I had to laugh. But this time I've got the big feather cut and the flares and the moustache. You've got to imagine, normally it's a wee cute kid at 5 and 6 coming up, with the short trousers and the wee scarf. And Dixie must have been looking, thinking, what on earth is this that's coming along here with these big flares? And as I say, the moustache and the huge hair. Hard to believe now, but the big feather cut and huge hair. Still, from time to time, I still got those pictures flowing at me as if to say. So I did say to Dixie, one of these days, Dixie, I'm going to bring that picture in, because you'll not believe that the sight. You were very diplomatic. I don't know how you kept a straight face, because when I look at the picture now, I was burst out laughing. So yes, I've met him, and I've thrown that one in, but I've never talked about his hat trick. So maybe that's for the next time.
Yeah, so you say there, Matt, you're part of 106,102 folks at Hampden. You're in the Celtic end. Who are you there with for that first big cup final win?
I'm there with my dad, and in 1972 we'd have been going over on the supporters bus, which had been the Cairn at that time. The Cairn for about 1968. Prior to that, my dad was in the Springburn club. So yeah, all games apart from New Year's Day. We didn't run a bus to games on New Year's Day, which typically was Clyde at Shawfield or Celtic Park, and they pretty much were the only days we went in the car at that time. So definitely that would have been a supporters bus, probably parking in Palmedy and then heading up to the game at Hampden. So I don't remain getting in. I remember sitting on the stanchions, I say, just a wee guy looking over this massive crowd, 106,000. It's incredible to think now on Saturday for that game, you'd less than half of that, which is really quite sad. Because you could probably have sold 100,000 tickets for that Saturday's game. It's certainly many more than 50,000, judging by the number of people that didn't have tickets, including my own family.
Yeah, I'd say so. But no, listen, a cracker to start us off, Matt. So 1972 Scottish Cup final, Celtic 6, Hibs 1. Most memorable for Dixie Dean's hat trick. What's your second one, Matt?
I guess the second one, jumping forward a wee bit, and this is where we'll bend the rules a wee bit, because going to fast forward really to the centenary year 1988, which was really pretty special for a number of reasons, and it'd been a bit of a mixed season. Big Billy was in his second spell at Celtic Park, as you can remember. Then the first one was the one I was borderline, because in 1980 was at that final for George McCluskey. Just mentioned him, George McCluskey diverts Danny's ball past the big McCloy in extra time. Another, a bit like Saturday, another one that could have went either way. Glorious day. And of course, there was a bother after it. But I remember that more. I was only 19, and I remember on that morning, me and my pal, who's dead now, God rest him. We went into Lumley's in the town, and we bought the new strip that was out. It was that classic one, just a white V-neck. You can remember the time, Frank McGarvey, and just before Charlie Nicholas. So Frank McGarvey, Danny McGrain, I guess the guys remember on that. So I remember that as being the one where you're sort of going as an adult for the first time to a Celtic Rangers match. 70,000, I think, in the game up the Celtic end that day. and another one that was, set you up for the whole summer. But then obviously we had that period of dominance with Aberdeen in particular, where Celtic were really struggling to replicate. We did have the 100th Cup final in the 85, which was special as well because of the goals. But I think I looked at those three thinking, can I pick one or two for them? But forced to narrow it down, the centenary one was just incredible for all the reasons. In 1987, they'd been spending big bucks across the road. We were really up against it. Billy had came back, after he'd left the first time, which is quite soon. Remember Billy leaving and Charlie Nicholas leaving, and I think we had a period there where I think we really struggled for a few years. But in that 96, the 87-88 season, everything just seemed to click. You were going to games at Easter Road. Everything was last-minute winners and coming back. The semi-final against Hearts, with 3 minutes to go, you're a goal down. I was there. My cousin from Ireland was with. I'm thinking he's came all the way from Ireland, and that the season's over here with 3 minutes to go. And when they blow the whistle, 3 minutes later, you're in the final. So it was. I think that was when Billy first started talking about the fairy tale club and the magic. And the final was everything. It was the most scorching hot day, and again quite topical given that Amy Gallagher scored a last-minute winner for Celtic women this year. With 10 minutes into the second half or whatever, and it's Ichi Peachy. They were a tremendous side. They had players that would have walked into our side, I felt, at that time. I think Jim McLean had them all in like 15-year deals at the time. But anyway, big Kevin Gallagher is beating Big Roy for pace, and it's a tremendous finish. Amy's dad, and again 15 minutes to go or whatever. You're thinking we've got through each stage. Are we going to fall at the final hurdle a wee bit like Saturday? And then of course Maka comes in. He's got that. He's got those two goals, including the winner right at the very end. And I always remember the scenes. It's Big Billy and all that coming out the dugout, and the subs all coming out the dugout with sunglasses on, and it's just a magical feeling. The centenary double. Next year, although we won the cup, the Joe Miller one, the Joe Miller Cup final. Another one I was at, but that was tens. It was a difficult season. Other than the cup final. I think we were preventing a treble. We won that, but the centenary season was just a magical year. Remember the musical came out and we're all at the pavilion celebrating. It was a bit, as I say, a bit like last year in the Invincibles year, which was the Lions anniversary in the Hydro, and the Player of the Year thing in the Hydro recently. It was a bit of a unique season for the Celtic, even for Celtic standards. It was a unique season. So centenary, and you often see that in social media, folks saying if I could pick one final, 1988. So I say by that time I'm a dad. I'm there. I'm there with the guys on the bus. My kids are two. Only my son, my oldest son, that's born at that time, is a baby. So I'm there with my pals, and at that time we'd have the Celtic club in Springburn. So it was probably a full weekend. You'd be in the club, then you go to the game, back to the club, and then on the Sunday go back to talk about the match. So they were, 1988. They were wonderful times. That was Billy pulled that team together from nowhere. 50,000 for Billy Stark. Andy Walker from Motherwell. He pulled a team at a fraction of the budget that Rangers had spent. And I always think that there's the fairy tale aspect that carried Celtic. They were a smashing side, don't get me wrong. But it sort of came from nowhere and just blew everything away. And then to win the cup final in the last minute of your centenary season, it was just like, if I'd written that, people would be laughing it off as too far-fetched. And I often say that in the tours. Most of the stuff I'm talking about here, if I wrote it, I would be laughed out, I'd be laughed out off the premises. But these things actually happened, and they happened the way I'm describing them. So centenary was a cracker. So it was a hard one to pick between those three in the 80s. But I'm opting for Frank McAvenny's double. Even though the 85 goals were wonderful goals, Frank Mac's double to win the centenary double, that just edges it for me.
And I can understand why it's been so hard to narrow it down to just that one, Matt. But I think you can't talk about Celtic historically without talking about the centenary season. It's just impossible. And there's a various quotes from that time. I was scribbling down. Obviously, you've got Billy McNeil around that time saying words to the effect of "there's a fairy tale about this club," and I had to reference it last week because there's shades of that with this season. It's different eras, different players, different times. The last-minute winners against Rangers in the Scottish Cup final, it throws you back to those kind of memories. There's also Tommy Burns' famous quote. He's on the pitch with Jim White, I think.
Yes.
And he points around, you said you weren't sure if it was sunny in 1972. It was blazing sun in 1988. And Tommy Burns says they're there and they're always there. And he points back to the huge crowd. And it's just special, really special stuff. And it was almost...
I saw Tim just saying, you triggered a memory. We were standing, the terrace in Celtic Inn was so packed. But I was standing with my brother-in-law, and sadly he passed away a couple of years ago. So that one for Billy.
And a nice one. No worries, and you know, and everyone will have their people who were there with them, whether it's that occasion, Matt, or anything else here. It's kind of what this is about, you know. It's kind of remembering the games, but it's remembering the time in your life, who you were with, what was going on, and different things of that nature. But yeah, it would seem absolutely set in stone that on 100 years of Celtic, we managed to lift a League and Cup double with Billy McNeil in the helm. So brilliant memory, Matt, for yourself, and I'm sure lots of folk listening in. Matt, number 3, moving on.
So number 3, I guess the rite of passage means I'm taking my son to a cup final for the first time. It's the 1995 final against Airdrie. Probably not remembered by the connoisseurs. Perhaps a wee bit like the weekend will be, but it was the most vital of cup finals for the obvious reason that since that Joe Miller winner in '89, we had really struggled. You had guys like Paul McStay and John Collins, Tony Boyd. Wonderful Celts who were season after season, but they weren't getting any honours. And of course, we also had Tommy. In the autumn, we'd got to the League Cup final at Ibrox, and I take a bit like my own, I guess, introduction. I take my son to his first final at Ibrox against First Division Raith Rovers. You couldn't make it up, could you? And then a wonderful Celt, Paul McStay. We're 2-1 up with seconds to go, a couple of minutes to go. Sorry, 2-1 up with a couple of minutes to go. I think it's Gordon Gale actually that gets a header out of nowhere, and all of a sudden a game that looked to be all of a sudden you're under pressure. You know that feeling you get behind the goal, thinking, oh, this isn't feeling good. And true to form of all players, it's Paul McStay who misses a penalty, and we lose the League Cup. So 6 months on, we're seriously under pressure to win. We haven't won the league, and we're up against Airdrie. So a banana skin if ever there was one. I always remember the thing that really, probably 2 things stand out there. The first one is a goal. You get Tosh McKinley, who had an absolute wand of a left foot. Tosh still around the park, lovely guy. He always says hello, always makes time for you. Tosh slings across this fabulous ball, and Big Pierre, the ball's in the air. It's Big Pierre, heads it down past John Martin, and he wins the cup. Now, I don't really remember much else about the game until the dying seconds when you have Peter Grant, and it was a recollection I got when I was listening to your podcast a few weeks ago with Peter. He talked about it. I hadn't realised he was so big a doubt for that game. But he runs whatever. In my head, it's 50, 60 yards in the dying seconds to make a sliding tackle. And you can bet your bottom dollar it goes to penalties. The way things were going around that time, that's a year after the takeover, that that might have ended in the same way as the Raith Rovers one. Anyway, thankfully it didn't. Grant makes the tackle. We lift the cup, and again, you talked about Tommy making comments about the crowd in that interview, that emotional interview. And the image I have in my head is Tommy hugging Paul McStay. I can't remember one's lifted the other off the ground. I think it's Tommy lifting Paul off the ground. He's got the coat, he's got the strip on, and it's just the sheer sense of relief. And I guess for me, that's the first time. So I'm casting my mind back. I'm in my 30s then, but I'm taking my son to see Celtic win a cup. It's a rite of passage thing, isn't it? And does it seem like 5 minutes since my dad was taking me? And now I'm taking my son, and we're going back, and we can talk about the day he won the cup, the day he saw Celtic win the cup at Hampden. It was a wee bit of false dawn, because obviously within the next couple of years, I'm listening to your Jock Brown one at the moment, so we're sort of in that era where, again, there's going to be some more pain before we get some more pleasure again. But just for that wee afternoon in Hampden, Hampden was being refurbished. I think the old stand was still there, because it was quite a small attendance, but it was not a good game by any manner of means, but it was a hugely significant, and as it turned out, what happened to Tommy, God rest him, it was a hugely emotional final, even to look back on now. So 1995 sneaks ahead of some ones that might have made more sense, or people might have thought otherwise, but I'm going for that one.
Yeah, and I suppose the purpose here, Matt, is to discover the ones that make most sense to you. Everyone will have their own angles on why some finals stand out for themselves. So it's important as to why this one, and as you say, it's taking your sons, and it's blink of an eye stuff. You were the kid being taken, and now you're the father. What I remember mostly about that final, and I'm in my teen years at that point, but it's not Tosh McKinley, it's not Pierre, it's the 3 guys you mentioned. It's Paul McStay, it's Tommy Burns, it's Peter Grant. It's the real Celtic guys who had experienced all that pain. Celtic hadn't won since the Joe Miller final in '89, so you've gone 6 years without a trophy. Rangers are clocking up the titles during those times. And as you say, Tommy Burns was under pressure, and for those guys to lift a trophy for him was just the most special thing. And you're right, there was some bumps in the road after, but thankfully it wasn't too long before Celtic get fully back on track. So a great memory, Matt. 1995 Scottish Cup final. Celtic won, Airdrie 0. What's going to be your fourth choice?
Okay, this is another one with a wee bit of dilemma. So indulge me, Tino, if you don't mind here. So we're going to sort of combine two if I can here. So in a similar vein, you're taking your son to the game in 1995. In 2011 was another quite a significant milestone. It was the final against Motherwell. This I know was a horrible rainy day, because one of the images that will last forever is the most fantastic. Whoever took this photographer should be awarded for it. You remember Charlie Mulgrew hits a free kick, and it's just an absolute screamer. Charlie's another, talked about Tosh. Charlie's another one with an absolute one-day left foot. We're behind the goal in line with it. And I remember watching it on the TV as well. Charlie leathers this ball at the roof of the net, and as it hits the net, the water cascades everywhere. It's just a fantastic memory. But again, a couple of things in that. That was the one where Neil Lennon had come into the club as a manager, and we'd lost it the year before. We'd lost to Ross County in the semi-finals, which was a real. We were doing the West Highland Way. I couldn't believe it. Somebody got told up in Rannoch Moor that Ross County had beat Celtic, and it was like 3 Celtic supporters and 15 Rangers supporters. So you can imagine the West Highland Way felt like the Great Wall of China, with 1,500 miles before you could go home and think that was actually real. So in 2011, we thought we're definitely doing it this year. And you might remember it was a sort of we're bringing back the Thunder sort of time, a real show of defiance for Celtic, and that was a very important cup. Walter Smith's Rangers had starting to put together a wee run of trophies, and we're under a bit of pressure. So we came here, but the thing that is probably more significant to me than all of those Celtic things was I remember being out at night, and it was the first time that I guess my pals and their sons, my sons, we all ended up in the Merchant City and the Neils, and it was just an absolute fab. It was an impromptu night. Just we're having a couple of pints. Why don't you come down? Before you know it, there's a group of us and my boys having a right Celtic sing along and whatever. It's a magical night. So 2011. And then what happened beyond that, Celtic really started to turn the corner, and over the years that dominance sort of started to creep back in. But I guess where that ends up is the number 5 cup final can only be the Invincible final. So I'm sort of trying to squeeze them all into that era. For me, that period started with the 2011 Motherwell game, and obviously Neil Lennon came in, Ronnie Dyler came in. But in 2017, like the centenary season, there's just something just incredible about that. Brendan had come in for the first time. Again, as always seems to be happening, we're under a bit of pressure after what's been on the previous season. And on the back of that, the springboard for that is the most magical season. And I guess I always said at the time that the Invincible season would not get the recognition it deserved at the time. A bit like the Lions. The Lions at Lisbon said they had no idea what they'd done. And it was only in latter years that when folk kept coming up, that the magnitude of what they'd achieved sort of was brought home to them. Now, I'm not comparing Invincible treble with Lisbon, but if you take Lisbon to the side, it's pretty much up there with anything else that we've ever done, in my opinion. And again, as Celtic, we stretch out the drama. So we've been through the league programme. We've got the League Cup and the 100th trophy, if I remember rightly. And I remember coming back to Celtic Park, which is something I'd never done. But when we won the League Cup in October or whatever, James Forrest scored. Again, it was Aberdeen. We came back and the fireworks going, and I think that's something that really lasts to this day now. And it's a real Saturday night. Seen it again at first hand. Party central down there. But we get to the cup final again. It's a rainy day, and back to my superstitions. I'm thinking Hampden in the sun, good. Hampden in the rain, not so good. But we actually look at the finals. It doesn't really pan out like that. But cup final for me is a short-sleeved hoops on, and we go to the match, no jacket. And if it's not like that, then I'm starting to worry again. And if you remember that day, it was, there was lots of rain. We lose an early goal. Celtic mad Johnny Hayes puts the ball in the net. Probably his last act as an Aberdeen player who signs for Celtic not long after it. Thankfully, and the goal that nobody talks about so much, and I think they should, is within a couple of minutes, you've got Callum McGregor's cutting across the box. He gets chopped down. Referee plays an advantage, which actually does work for us for once. And Stuart Armstrong pins an absolute cracker. We're up the Celtic end, he pins a cracker into the far side. But we're going right to the death. And again, we're quite low down that day. I remember we were quite low down in the Celtic end. Well, sort of looks not the greatest view, but I also remember the crack of lightning. I wrote about it in the book. I also remember the flash of lightning, and the lightning. And when you see it on the TV, the lightning tends to coincide with Tom Rogic picking the ball back in midfield, and as I would say, starts to glide. Big Tom Rogic didn't run anywhere. He glided across the surface, wasn't he? 6'2" or whatever. But he just had that ball control that allowed him just to keep moving, graceful, like everything I'm not. The Wizard had. But I remember the lightning coming and he's moving. And for where we were, it looked as if he'd taken it far too wide. And even looking at the TV, you're thinking he's not really any right to score how he scored. And then just that minute, that second, I guess, when the ball hits it, you see the ball sort of coming round the net towards us in our corner. And there's a lovely, there's a fabulous, I don't know, is it GIF? There's a fabulous image. You'll have seen it a few times. And it's taken for the other end, for the Aberdeen end, and it's Craig Gordon on his knees, basically going down. It's the most iconic thing. So that particular day, you get Tom scoring the goal and runs over the crowd on the far side. And then, if you remember, earlier on in the game, Kieran KT had taken a real sore one to the face. I mean, a dreadful challenge. I think the guy was booked. But anyway, like Stockley, it's a dreadful challenge, and his final's finished. I also remember the Biden image. We were watching as the cup's getting passed along, and each player getting a cheer. You sort of know the routine. And then the next minute, and this is the 50th anniversary of the Lions. A couple of nights earlier, we've had that night in the Hydro, which is just incredible. All the Celtic managers up there, the Lions that were still with us were still there, and the place was bouncing, and it was just the most fabulous night. Again, I'm there with the kids. It's just like, my dad's not with us now, but for that few hours, he absolutely is, because we're talking about Lisbon, we get Fergie talking up the Lions. It was just a perfect night. And then three days later, you're rolling up for this game, and Celtic being Celtic, we take it to the dying seconds, and then there's drama that, again, you couldn't script. The lightning across the park as your big Australian midfielder is gliding through defenders. It's like something that's like slow motion at the movie. Then he clips the ball in, and then, as I say, that last image, just to finish off, you get Willie Wallace, Lisbon Lion, going for Australia. He's presenting the cup, and he's in the background, and then you get KT coming over. He's got blood coming down his mouth, and he's grabbing the jersey, and he's giving it this stuff. And I don't know, even at my age, I'm like, yeah, I'll have some of that. That's what it meant. Apparently, he got dropped off in the car park still with his dual Celtic kit on. Came through all sorts of grief for our Aberdeen colleagues just to make sure he was up at Hampden to get a hand on the cup. So I'll have some of that. So if we're going to finish anywhere, I guess finishing with an invincible treble with the sort of image and just the whole magic that was around that era, then I don't quite know how you beat it. Even the last minute winner on Saturday, I love that. I think that whole thing about the invincibility was just incredible. I don't think that'll ever be repeated, but who knows?
I think if you're talking recent memories, or more modern cup finals, Matt, it's going to be very hard to beat the Invincibles. There's various points you've mentioned there, and it triggers my own thinking as you're going through it. For me, I think there's 4 really iconic images for me.
Okay.
There's certainly Tom Rogic after he scores and he's pulling the shirt, as he's running away. Second to that is when he jumps in the crowd, and there's just bodies everywhere, and there's some folks who are lucky enough to be in that picture, and they'll never forget that image. That must be in living rooms, wow, across the country, which is amazing. The other 2 pictures, you're spot on. It's Craig Gordon dropping to his knees at the realization of what he and his teammates have achieved. At the pinnacle, the peak of a whole campaign, and it's KT. So the story goes that, he gets elbowed off Jayden Stockley fairly early in the game. The man to replace him is Tom Rogic. So there's a something there. There's a fairy tale element there. And I think a Celtic friendly dentist who's in the hospitality seats takes KT, throws him in the Porsche or whatever it was, takes him to surgery, does temporary surgery on him, and whisks him back to Celtic or to Hampden Park. He can only get so close. And as you say, KT runs out, boots and all, runs through the folks, the Aberdeen fans leaving to have his moment, lifting the cup. It's just, we touched on it, Matt. We talked about fairy tale stuff. That is it in a nutshell. Tell me this, I wasn't familiar, I don't know how I've missed that. I wasn't familiar with the lightning strike. So just remind us what happened there.
Absolutely, you do see it in the telly, and it's a memory of anything. I made it up, I'm watching the video back. So as it picks the ball up in midfield, do you remember that day? It was raining constantly. literally as he picks the ball up in midfield, there's a flash of lightning across the sky at Hampden. It's the most incredible thing. And at that point, he's on the ball, and within a few seconds, the ball's in the net. It's like, where did that come from? I kid you not, it actually happened. I watched it just to convince myself I hadn't made it up.
And you know the very first thing myself and several folks are now going to do is jump onto the highlights to see that. But
so laughing to go off.
Yeah, but absolutely an incredible day, Matt. So it's a 2017 Cup final. It's Brendan Rodgers' first season. Yes. We're invincibles and everything that goes with it. So, Matt, I know it's been hard for you to narrow it down. You know, you've ended up kind of taking it to those 5 Cup finals. So just a quick reminder, 1972, your first trophy lift in person. Yep. 1988, one of a few during the 80s, but the big one being the Centenary Cup final, part of a double. 1995 Scottish Cup final, Tommy Burns manager, Paul McStay skipper. Yep. 2011, not one that most folk would pick, but as you say, it's the kind of start of that dominance, isn't it? It's Lenny, it's bringing back the Thunder, and it's a seriously rainy day at Hampden there. I'm in the front row that day, Matt. I'm in the North Stand front row. You think the front row might be a good place to be? Not that day. Absolutely soaked. I was there with my good mate Kush. We got absolutely rinsed, but still a brilliant day. And then 2017, as you say, Invincible Cup final. Special memories for anyone to be there. But anyone of a Celtic persuasion, it was just a glorious day. Can you pinpoint one of those 5, Matt, if you're put on the spot?
Oh well, I think I'm going to. If I go to pinpoint one, I can't do that. Can I have a childhood one and an adult one?
You can pinpoint 2.
I can pinpoint 2. Well, I guess the first one is pretty special. 1972, 6-1 Dixie. That's a day, as you know, what we're talking about now, 28, we're talking about 52 years ago. 52 years ago in that memory, I could probably still rattle through the teams and the crowd. So that's pretty special. That game sort of ingrained in my head, the goals. There's another wee thing about that as well. And also, Tommy Callaghan's the most humble of guys, but I always say to him, I think that day, yourself and Bobby Murdoch in midfield, they were up against tremendous players, Hibs, Cropley and Stanton, Jim O'Rourke, all these guys. But that day, Bobby Murdoch and Tommy Callaghan were absolutely immense. So Dixie scored a hat-trick, Lou scored 2, Jim Craig set up 2. But Bobby Murdoch and Tommy Callaghan were immense that day. So yeah, for the childhood, that's by far the happiest. I was lucky enough to be at European Cup semi-finals, neither of which we progressed in. But lucky enough to see Celtic playing at with the exception of the European Cup final itself, I was lucky enough to see Celtic playing at, pretty much at the summit of Europe. But nothing ever beat sitting at Hampden, with your dad, over 100,000 in the bowl, watching Celtic destroy a wonderful Hibs side with 6 goals, and your favourite player scoring a hat trick. It was so far removed from all the projections at the time and my experiences up to that time that it wasn't true. So I guess the childhood would be that one, and from the adulthood, Invincible. I think, again, the benefit with the Invincible one is, which we never touched on, I'm there with my kids. So we're going through this together. So in 50 years' time, hopefully the kids are telling their kids and everything about the day they watched the Invincible thing. The way I'm talking about the 6-1 game, in decades to come, my kids will be talking about that Invincible as, perhaps the first time they've done X or Y. So I just think it highlights, that gap of 55 years. 45 years between the 2 finals or whatever. That's the 2 very different stages of your life, but one common denominator. A bit of magic for Celtic, the Scottish Cup at the end, the Scottish Cup, you touched on it very earlier. It's a magical trophy in itself, isn't it? It's, the history that's beyond that. I don't know if you're going to touch on that separately, but there's something special about the Scottish Cup final. I love winning the titles. The Kilmarnock that night, it was just wonderful. The place was jumping, and then you have the celebration on Saturday. But there's something magical about going to Hampden when the crowd split, and you're up against it, and you pull through, and there's a trophy at the end of the 90 minutes, and so you can still recall how you got there, who you were with. But it's hard to beat that feeling. It's a sore one when you lose, but my goodness, it's a wonderful feeling. It's a wonderful memory to have. I've been very lucky in that particular tournament, competition.
Absolutely. So just in terms of the timescales, Matt, as you say, you've picked out 1972 as your first and favourite memory, then 2017 is your favourite, certainly in recent times. A 45-year gap between those, And certainly, given that you were at the cup final there on Saturday, what we'll call the Idah Cup final, it's 52 years of Scottish Cup finals, man. It's a pretty successful one, as we've covered there. 19 wins and only 4 defeats. Matt, you've touched on it, and you've kind of stepped into what my next question, or one of my final questions, is going to be. What is it about Celtic in the Scottish Cup? There is this special relationship. You've covered that, and we've all got these phenomenal memories over the years about, special moments for special players and special teams. But what is it you think that makes it such a unique relationship between Celtic and that trophy?
And it's a difficult one to answer, but there is no question that there's sort of magic in the air when the Scottish Cup comes, and I guess it sort of comes to the surface on the tours. Because as you can imagine, you've got all age ranges in the tours, and particularly so. I tend to be one of the older ones. No jokes at the back now. I tend to be one of the older ones on the group. But from time to time, there are folk who are older, and they'll talk. You mentioned one earlier. They'll talk about the '65 Cup final or the '60. I actually remember the '69 Cup final was the year before I went to my first one, and I remember where I was that day. It wasn't at Hampden, sadly, but I do remember in the town, being in the town with my mum and my sisters, I think. And the buses going by with the guys at the door giving it this, so we knew we'd won. So there's just so many magical memories. Patsy Gallagher, 1925. There's two McStay brothers, and Celtic beat Dundee in the final. There's two McStay brothers. You get Patsy Gallagher with somersault goal, Jimmy McGrory with a last minute header, and then 60 years later, there's two McStay brothers at another one we sort of touched on briefly, the 100th Cup final. Two brothers, they're great nephews. Celtic beat Dundee United. So Jimmy Quinn's hat-trick in 1904. There's even a final we lost. Within a year of Celtic being formed, they're in the final of the Scottish Cup. It's absolutely unheard. They were playing against the 3rd Lanarkshire Rifle Volunteers, or 3rd Lanark, and they played a game. It's called the Snow Final. They play this game, and there's thousands of folk in there, and after it, they decide to let people know it was a friendly because of the conditions, and Celtic lose in the final. So you get back to 12 months after 12 months after Celtic's founded, pretty much, they're playing in the Scottish Cup final. And I actually think it goes all the way back. We first won it in 1892, and there's so many finals of every generation you could mention. I've talked about 1903 final, you had the great side of 1908, you get 1925 Cup final, then the 30s Cup final is the game. I'm probably with a big Motherwell historian now, and he says, please don't write about those two finals. We still not go over it 90 years down the line. You've got the two finals, 31 in 1931. There's 7 minutes to play. We're 2 goals down. You'll love this one. They send pigeons back to Motherwell to tell the news that Motherwell's won the cup for the first time. It's the first final. There's 7 minutes to go, but they reckon without McGrory. McGrory pulls a goal back and then forces a centre half into a last-second equaliser. Motherwell beat, and we don't lose replays, do we? McGrory and Bertie Thompson, God rest them, they do the business in the midweek. That allows Celtic to take the Scottish Cup to the USA and Canada. A few weeks later, the first British team to take it here. There's people in tears when they arrive in New York because the sight of Celtic and the jerseys and the Scottish Cup. So there's that emotional attachment. So if you look at the trophies in the cabinet, you've got the Scottish Cup and the SPL trophy. With the greatest of respects, the SPL trophy brings that prestige, Champions League. But for me, it's a no-brainer. The Scottish Cup is the magical trophy in there. I say you go through your 65 Cup final you've talked about, your double of Jock Stein in 54, 51 Hookie McPhail. Without even pausing for breath, you can probably pick one for each decade that's got that you could actually write a story about on its own. And just say we're lucky enough now to have people who can actually remember being at finals in the 50s and whatever, and they'll share that with you. They'll pass it down to their kids. So it's a relationship. It saved a lot of 1995. We touched on Tino. It saved a lot of fight. It saved a lot of seasons where perhaps the league campaign hasn't gone as well, and you've got to the end of the season. It's been a struggle, but we're still there. We're always there, as Tommy says. And then in the cup final, something magical happens, and all of a sudden you've got a trophy, and the whole mood around the place is lifted. So we're putting the trophy back in on Saturday night, and it's like baby's home, and people are laughing at you. I'm like, no, baby's home. That's where it should be. That's where it belongs. There's a place there for it, and it's not there. A couple of years ago, we lost in the semi, and one goal in extra time. We lost in the semi, and for a year, you're thinking it's not the same. It's not the same with the Scottish Cup, because the Scottish Cup allows us to bring in so many, even in the tour. Selfishly, the Scottish Cup allows you to bring in so many different aspects of Celtic's history. It is not true. So so for another 12 months, I can relax, and we've got all our stories about all these wonderful Celtic players from for Jimmy Quinn to to the Wizard, to Kyogo, and now to Idah. It's just, what's the constant? It's Celtic ribbons on the Scottish Cup. It's a wonderful story. Sorry, I'm going on a bit, but I love it.
Do you know, absolutely brilliant, man. Now, what is clear, what we've covered here is just how important the Scottish Cup is to Celtic, absolutely, but just how important it is to you. You know, you can hear the passion coming through and the various stories and as you're talking, there's a new memory popping into your head. One thing I never expected to cover today was pigeons heading out to Motherwell, but we'll maybe get more of that another time. I'm sure, Matt, just to finish off the piece, I'm sure it's a real honour. So now, as part of this time in your life, you're a tour guide at Celtic Park, and there must be a real honour for Matt Corr, the adult, to now put the Scottish Cup trophy back in the trophy cabinet at Celtic Park and to tell those stories, whilst also being a million miles away from the Matt Corr who was there in 1972. So to round off, Matt, tell us just how special that type of thing is for you. You don't take it for granted, do you?
No, certainly not. As I mentioned, right up to the last minute, you're thinking, oh, it's going to be a year without World Cup again. But no, it's the most incredible feeling to you see the pure joy in Saturday night. You see the pure joy in folks' faces, the elation that cuts back. I don't think anything else brings that. Even the title. I mean, that's just a personal opinion. I think when folks see the Scottish Cup, particularly folk of a certain age, it just evokes a million memories. So it's a cup that will always, hopefully always, forever be intrinsic link. We've won it more than anyone else. I refer to it as our cup, which is maybe wrong, maybe selfish, but I refer to it as our cup. I think it's intrinsically linked with our story. And when you look at that, as you say, there's 15, 20 memories come off without matter of thought. And my memories will be different for yours, but the cup's a constant.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Do you know, it's a perfect place to finish. Matt, thanks as always for joining us here on the Celtic Exchange. Don't forget, if you're watching or listening, to check out Matt's Just Given page ahead of his trip to Malawi on Sunday. As I say, we'll link to this in the show notes. You can go directly there and get in touch with Matt to make your request for your Celtic story, your Celtic slide, or whatever in Celtic's history is most important to you. But in the meantime, Matt, it's been brilliant as always to have you on the Celtic Exchange once again. Thanks for sharing your Scottish Cup memories with us, and very best of luck to you and everyone else making that very special trip out to Malawi.
That's really kind, Tino. Thanks very much. Do take care.